Okie dokie. So we were learning in the middle of the halacha yesterday, we were talking about the rights of the lender and the obligations of a debtor to a lender to pay back a loan on time. And also that if the creditor says to the debtor, the loan is due, please, I'm here to collect. The debtor, if he has the money, is not permitted to tell him, come back later, if he has the money to pay back. Okay, so we were just starting off the parameters of this, and we saw a very bizarre statement made by the Imrei Yaakov that according to some opinions, the debtor doesn't have to pay back until the creditor asks him for the money, which you have to say is talking about certain situations, because in many other situations, we said, it would seem that maybe the creditor isn't coming to you because he doesn't want to embarrass you, right? So the whole thing is just, there's a little bit of gray here that we haven't totally figured out yet. But anyway, we're going further. We're up to Sifkat and Chav Zayin. Velomar lo leich vasho. You're not allowed to tell, you as a debtor are not allowed to tell your creditor, go back and go and come back tomorrow. The Isser zeh eno ela imiskavin litchoso. And this prohibition is only if your objective is to just push him off because you don't feel like paying him right now. But let's say you're genuinely busy, like you're underneath your car, right, fixing your transmission, right? And the guy says, "Hey neighbor, I'm here to collect my loan," and you say, is it okay? I mean, I'm in a very compromising position right now. I'm not able to do it. Can we take care of this later? Okay, so Rashai Lomar Lo, Leich Vashov La'achar Zman Kishi Yeli Panai. So you are allowed to tell him, listen, I can't do it this second, but I'll definitely take care of it as soon as I'm finished. So Vitzarach Ian Ad Emosai Rashai Hu Bakach. So we don't really have clarity on how long you're allowed to delay the repayment of the debt. He says, let's say the lender tells the debtor, I do need the money back because I have a business opportunity that I need that money for. And the lova, instead of giving him back in a timely fashion, holds on to them for longer. If, let's say, because of the debtor's delay in paying him back, the lender loses out on a business opportunity, so therefore he's incurred a loss by not having that money back, that's definitely an avera to be chalked up to the debtor, right? He's done something morally wrong. And it's a form of theft. It's a form of stealing from another Jew. The Afsade Mammon Bigarma, because he's caused him a financial loss. Now, is it the same thing as breaking into his house and stealing his money? Obviously not. It's through his passivity, he's caused him a financial loss. But it's still nonetheless an Avera. Okay, Leich Vashov, go and come back later. The Chayiv Haloi Velaholi Chamos Lamalve Imhu Ba'ir. Right? It is the debtor's obligation to go to the creditor. The creditor is not obligated to go and pick up his money. It is the debtor's obligation to go to the creditor to pay him back. It is usher to say to the creditor, can you stop by and pick up what I owe you? No, you can't do that. In other words, he serviced your debt. You have to at least travel to him to pay him back. Okay. The Eved Lova Ishmael, as the Gemara says, that the debtor becomes sort of like the servant of the lender, because the lender has extended credit to him. But if they're not in the same city, so that's an interesting point. If they're not in the same city, the debtor is not obligated to travel to another city in order to get him the money. Now, it could be that that's only if the loan was made in Minsk, and now, right, in other words, the lender was in Minsk, and he gave the money to the guy in Minsk, and now the lender is in Pinsk. So the debtor is not obligated to travel to Pinsk in order to pay back the loan. He can say to him, when's the next time you're going to be in Minsk, and I'll give you the money. That is permissible if the loan was done in Minsk, right? But if the debtor had traveled to Pinsk to get the money, logic would dictate that he's got to pay back the debt in Pinsk. Okay. Okay. So like if I know a guy in Hamilton that can lend me the money, and then he says, pay me back in 30 days, I believe that the halacha would be that you got to go back to Hamilton. It's just not like you can say, well, when next time you're in Toronto, come and get it. Yeah. 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 It's less relevant with wire transfers, obviously. Yeah, for sure. And let's say there's a fee on the wire transfer, it would seem that the debtor has to assume that cost of the transfer. It would seem that way because you've got to give him back got to make sure he gets back whatever he gave to you. Okay. All righty. Let's go to halacha hey. What about you have to go to a lawyer and get a document made up to protect that? Yeah. What about those? Yeah, it stands to reason that whatever fees are related to the loan should be assumed by the debtor. It seems that way, but we haven't seen that. I mean, we haven't seen it explicitly in science. I'm just saying that logic dictates that the lender should not have to assume any costs if he's giving a loan. Yeah. Okay. It is forbidden for the debtor who's taken a business loan to take that loan and to use it for other purposes. If he's expressed, I guess, to the lender that he's borrowing the money for his parnasa, you're not allowed to go ahead and then go on vacation with that money. Be'inyan shehu ma'avda min hamalva shelo yimtza mimalagavos chovo. He says here, I guess what he's doing is he's talking about a situation where you use the money in such a way that you're causing the lender to not be able to retrieve the debt. Now, what does that mean? So we're going to see some examples. V'im osake nikra Russia. And if you do that, you're called a Russia. Afal pi shahamal ve'asher gadol v'hu ani. Even though the lender is very wealthy and the debtor is very poor. Shenemar love rasha v'lo yishalem. As it says in Tehillim, that he who borrows money is wicked if he does not pay back the loan. So even though you may have borrowed the money with all good intentions, but then you decide, maybe I'll use this money for something, for another purpose, and that other purpose is purely speculative or risky, and it causes the lova to lose all the money. He doesn't have the wherewithal to pay it back. So that's considered to be an isser. So before we go any further, let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov to see what he's talking about. Ulahotzia shelo letzarech esek parnasasa. Kasav hataz, dimotzia laoso ha'inyan shalova min amalva. Afilu hu ma'avdo ein kan isser. So the Taz writes that if you borrow the money from the malva, let's say you tell him you need it for your business, and then the business goes mechula, and the lova doesn't have the wherewithal to pay him back. He says, you're not doing anything prohibited. You had all good intentions, and unfortunately the business went belly up. You had you had this great business idea that you were going to do something, and it was a business idea that just wasn't its time, right? And it just didn't work out. He says, Ki al das kain hilva, because As long as you borrowed the money with that intent in mind and you disclosed why you're borrowing the money from the malva, it was up to the malva to decide whether that was a good investment or not. And let's say you borrow the money from the malva and you decide that instead of using it for the express purpose of what you had borrowed it for, you decide to go on vacation with it. And you say, you know what, I'll figure out another way to borrow them to get the money. But now that I have this extra, $10,000 from my friend, my wife hasn't had a vacation, kids need to get out. So you go down to Florida instead. So as long as you can pay back that money, you also haven't done anything usser. Shaharei lo hilvehu dafka aleisek zeh, ela hayasaber demistama yasa oso ezek shagila lo lamalva. He says, and the reason is because the terms of the loan were not predicated upon you using the money for that express purpose. Even if you revealed to the lender, I plan, I'm looking to start up this new endeavor. I could use a little bit of help. Do you have some disposable income that you can lend me? I need about $10,000 to get me going. And the Malva says, sure, you need 10,000. Here's a loan. Pay me back in 6 months when you're back on your feet. And that's it. If that's the whole conversation, if the borrower decides to use it for some other purpose, as long as he has the wherewithal to pay it back when the debt is due, that's okay, because it wasn't, the Malva did not say explicitly that I'm only lending it to you if you use it for your business. Okay? Yeah.
I borrow money. Sure. You need it, I'll give it to you, whatever it is. Give it to them express person because they trust, not because of what the actual deal is.
Right.
So therefore you have to switch.
Right. So then you wouldn't have to, even if you told him the reason why I want to take a loan is because of some business endeavor. As long as you know that you can get him back the money, you're not doing anything else.
Then
so that's right. Right. So this is the halacha that we're dealing with, right? The question is, right? So what we'll see in just a second. You will see the text. He says because the Malva doesn't really care. In other words, the scenario that Moshe was saying, like, I don't care. You asked for a loan. You're my friend. I gave you $10,000. You wanted to use it for something else. That's your business. As long as I can get my money back, right? He says the isser is only when you change the stated purpose for the loan and you used it for vacation instead, and then you failed in your business endeavor, and now you got nothing. Okay? In that kind of situation, then you've done it in Aveira, because the lender had given it to you in good faith with the assumption that you were going to use it for something. And by the way, it's still not 100% clear. You could think of a number of different scenarios where the lender doesn't care if you use it for something else. Let's say the guy borrows $10,000 from you, and then his in-laws give him a gift of $10,000. So he uses the gift to invest in the business, and he uses your money instead on something else that maybe, was a completely disposable kind of spending, right? So we'll see. In other words, we're going to see certain circumstances that may change this halacha, but let's see where we're going with this.
Without having any sort of idea that it's an investment into the business, you're going to gain from it. So if you're letting out, you're doing it as a friendly sort of gesture, and that means you know the person fairly well. But I would think people would be bothered, anybody would be bothered to find out that money went on to the vacation and it didn't go into the business. I don't see where anybody would not be upset about that.
I hear your point, Ron. You become resentful. Oh, I see you went down to Florida. Yeah, I decided that my in-laws gave me some cash for the business, and so I decided to use the money you lent me and take my family to Florida. I could certainly see the resentment in the lender.
You think, well, why didn't you just give the money back?
That's right. Why didn't you just give me the money back? So, and the answer is, well, you said that you didn't need it. And so I figured, why should my family be miserable? So I decided I made an executive decision, and I decided to use the money you lent me for another purpose. All right. So again, this is still somewhat unclear. Let's continue and see where we get with this halacha. And you use the money for a purpose other than your business, which causes the money to be lost. Pirish. He says what this means is that the borrower's objective was not to cause the money to be lost. But whenever you borrow money, and it's not a considerable need for you to borrow the money, but you use it for something that is non-essential, okay, then that's called you're using the money just to dispose of it. Whenever you borrow money that you don't need for your parnasa or that you don't need for an essential purpose, is considered to be borrowing the money for the sake of destroying it or disposing of it. He says, because because what turns out is that if you have a downturn in your income, you won't be able to return the debt, and therefore, havalei ba'abed ma'os chavera, and therefore you're causing your friend's money that he loaned you to be lost by using it on something that's non-essential. Like we're going to see in this halacha. The whole idea here, and we're going to continue reading in the text of the Rav Shulchan Aruch, when you borrow money for an essential need, and then you end up losing the money, and you thought you were going to be able to get it back, but you needed the money to keep your business afloat, you were in dire straits, and so you borrowed the money, and just in order to keep your business afloat. And then, unfortunately, despite the fact that you had every good intention of paying the money back, the business still fails. So then you're considered an honest. You're not a bad person. You just are a person that, you had every good intention. But if you borrow money with the objective of using it for essential needs, and then you change it for non-essential things, then you're speculating on someone else's money for non-essential purposes. In other words, the point of this halacha is you can only borrow money from another yid and thereby putting his money at risk if the need that you have is great. You need this money either to sustain yourself or to keep your business going. But to borrow money so that you can go to a Pesach program, or to borrow money so that your family can have a vacation, or that you can buy a new car when your old car you can get by with your old car, that's considered to be borrowing money for a non-essential purpose. And therefore, it's usur if, in other words, it'll be usur in retrospect if you end up not being able to pay back the money. Okay. Totally different category, because borrowing money from a Gentile is where the Gentile is willing to risk losing his money because he knows there's a plus side because you're paying him interest. So there's a plus side to that risk. It's a business transaction, right? Just a friend helping out a friend. I don't know. I don't know. Certainly, if we put it in the category of stealing, when you don't pay back a loan, then it would apply to a Gentile as well. But it's a good question, and I don't have an answer yet. Let's continue going on. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Rabbi, for a non-essential loan, do the laws of interest apply there too?
Yeah, you're never allowed to charge interest on a loan, regardless of what your fellow Jew needs the money for. Even if he tells you, I want to buy a new car, but I'm a few $1,000s short, and you say to him, no problem, I'll front you the money. Even though that's not essential, you can't charge him interest. It's an Isser Deoraisa. Yeah. Okay.
Company where if people were paying beyond the terms of the invoice, we would charge interest. So is it up to the bookkeeper now to separate the Jews out from the non-Jews? Who's getting charged interest and non-interest?
Right. So you're asking a question about the laws of interest, right? There's a vast sea of halacha in the laws of charging interest. So we're not going to go into all of the details right now, but your question is valid. How do you deal with Jewish customers? You're running you are the owner of your company, and you're extending credit to customers, and you charge them interest when they don't pay back in a timely fashion. So the simple understanding of the halacha is that you would have to create a heter iska, one of those documents that sort of circumvents the laws of charging with interest in order for that to be legal. As a general rule, though, I will tell you this: you are allowed to charge a one-time service fee or late fee, but it can only be a one-time fee. In other words, let's say I'm a landlord and I have a lessee, person who's leasing a property from me, and he's a Yid and I'm a Yid, and the rent is due on the first of the month. And in the contract that it says that if you don't pay by the first of the month, you will be charged a 10% late fee service charge. That's halachically permissible as long as it's a one-time and it's not based on a accrual of interest for every day that elapses. So one-time fee you're allowed to do according to halacha. What do you mean? How do you get around it?
Still,
That's not called ribbis. The reason why you're paying that money is not because I've extended you credit and I'm charging you interest on the loan, but rather that you have inconvenienced me by not paying your debts on time or paying the rent on time, and therefore I'm allowed to charge you for that. It's a penalty. It's not charging interest on a percentage of the thing, right? So you're allowed to charge a one-time service fee, but it cannot accrue. If the guy, let's say, doesn't pay for a full month, you can't tack on an additional service charge. Right, correct.
no, that's a loss for them.
Yeah, that's you see the whole definition of charging with interest. The whole definition of charging with interest is someone is paying to delay payment of a debt. And so it's called agar natar. Payment for waiting is literally what the Gemara calls it. But if there's a service charge, because I have to pay the 3% to the credit card company because you paid me by credit card, I'm not charging you for any delay. I'm charging you because it costs me 3% to go to the credit card company, right? So there's no interest involved at all. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay.
It's like making money on shipping.
Maybe like 2.75%.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like on shipping too. It's very common in business. If the shipping is $7.83, you on $8 and they can add on, and nobody ever knows the difference.
Right, but you're not, again, that's
There's
legal
no time back.
because it's, right, you're not charging for waiting, you're not charging for time. Okay, but again, it's a vast sea of information, yeah. Okay, anyway, let us go on in the Rav Shulchan Aruch. So a person who uses a loan for non-essential purposes and ends up losing the money and can't pay back is considered a rasha. That's an evil person. Ucheshahamalve makir es halove shehu bal midazu mutab shelo lahalvoto mishiyalvehu v'yitztorich linogso achar kach. He says when the malve recognizes that the lova, the borrower, is that kind of person, that he'll borrow money for non-essential reasons, then it is better not to lend him money at all than to lend him money and then pressure him to pay back the loan. And he'll end up violating the prohibition of do not oppress a debtor when you know he doesn't have the money. In other words, if you know a fellow is irresponsible with money that he gets from other people, and he'll use it frivolously, he'll use it for non-essential needs, then you're doing a bigger mitzvah by not lending that kind of person money than by lending him money and then afterwards putting pressure on him to pay you when you know he doesn't have the money, because it's not going to turn out well. Aval im hotzia litzarech esek parnasaso v'achar kach mata yado ve'eno lifroa. But as the Imrei Yaakov had foreshadowed for us, you lend a guy money for a genuine, essential business need, and then Nebach, he loses the money and he has a total loss of fortune, and he doesn't have the wherewithal to pay you back. Anasu ve'eno chayiv lahaskir atzmo v'lo lasu shumalacha k'dei lifroa. And so what is it, what then becomes the obligation of the debtor? What does the debtor have to do in order to get you back the money he loaned you? So the first thing the Rav Shulchan Aruch says, the debtor is not obligated to hire himself out for whatever tasks he needs to in order to pay back the debt, in order to service the debt. In other words, let's say a guy has a business, the business collapses and it fails. And he says, and he goes to the creditor, he says, look, I'm really sorry, the business failed. Somehow I'm going to make it up to you, but I need a little bit more time. And the creditor says, well, you can check bags at Sobeys for the next few months, and then you'll make the extra money back that way. That's what I expect you to do. So the halacha does not require the debtor to hire himself out to make up that additional, to earn that additional money in order to service the debt. That the halacha does not require him to do that. What does the halacha require him to do? So that's what we're going to see. Okay. Afal pisha nikra lo v'rasha v'lo yishalem. Even though under normal circumstances, a person who fails to pay back his debt is called a rasha. But if you're an anus, but if you really, you acted in good faith and you simply just don't have the money to pay him back, you're not called a rasha in that situation. Umikol makom. But that being said, kol mamon sheyagia liyado v'chol hametaltin hayisrem al kedei siddur shemesadrin lebal chov chayav litan hakol lamalva. But that being said, any income that you do receive, right, you do that it goes above and beyond what a debtor is allowed to use for his essential needs, and any chattel, any movable property that the debtor owns has to be dedicated to servicing the debt. The guy can't say, I know I owe you the money, the business went mechula, I'll deal with it after I take my family on Pesach vacation, right, to Florida. No, you can't do that. Obviously, you have to service the debt. If you have an extra few $1,000s to take the family to Florida, you cancel your trip and you use that money to pay back the debt. That's your halachic obligation. And that's not called, no, that money is essential because I need to take my family to Florida for Pesach. We'll continue in Mirz Hashem this halacha, in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Have a good day.